Hey, Tatooine Sons family, this is David. Just a quick update on some changes that are coming to the release schedule and cadence and format beginning next week. This week we'll have our 3 Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes, but the reality is school for Nathan starting college and work things has caused us to make the decision where we are going to retract back to a 1 episode per week format, and that will begin starting with a release next week. And we're actually going to shift our release day back to what it was for quite a long time, back to Tuesdays. And so beginning on August 27th, we will return to our a little bit longer format, hour-long roughly episode, but that will be coming out once a week. And then I did also want to give you a quick update and let you know that there will be no episode after we go back to this change. There won't be an episode on September 3rd on that Tuesday, because we will be the previous weekend. We will be spending Labor Day weekend in Orlando at Disney World as a family vacation. So we will not be able to record on Monday the 2nd. So then we will return to our normal release schedule again on September 10th. Thank you guys so much for being a part of the Tatooine Sons family, for being a part of what we try to do every week. We appreciate you. Hopefully getting back to a weekly release schedule will allow us to have a little bit more consistency and allow us time to do some other things, which would be some promoting and some things that we're doing in Substack, and also open up the door for the schedule to allow for us to do that Christian mythology podcast that we're talking about when we reach 100 subscribers. But that's enough of an update. Let's get to the episode. This is Tatooine Sons, a pop culture podcast, the only fan podcast to name a canon Star Wars creature and to be endorsed by the writer and the director of The Last Jedi, Rian Johnson. Last week we shared our overall thoughts, both positive and negative.
Negative? That's never.
Very rare for us.
That is actually pretty rare.
About season 1 of The Acolyte. But what do we think about the story itself? This week we'll explore more of what happened and what it means for Star Wars. This is Tatooine Sons.
It's true. All of it.
What is the name of the Porg on the Millennium Falcon?
Force is strong in my family.
What do you think his name is? It's a big moment.
I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Maybe Turbis?
Do or do not. There is no try.
Turbis? Pablo, if you're listening to this live stream, that Porg's name is now Turbis. It's a good Star Wars name.
We're not done yet.
These guys recorded an awesome podcast called Tatooine Sons. Everybody was lit.
Okay, we had a birthday party already.
Yeah.
Watching Tenet.
We did watch Tenet.
How's it?
It's a great movie.
We're doing some stuff this week. We're gonna have some steak next
Love
week on
steak,
your actual
yeah.
birthday. Chicken nugget, mom's homemade chicken nuggets.
Great as well. It's a great day.
With it, anything else we're gonna do fun for your birthday?
Don't know.
Is that it?
I think that's pretty much it. Just chill, which is fine by me.
Yeah, you're more of a let's
Yeah.
keep things low key kind of.
Yeah, very much so.
Well, happy birthday.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
It's pretty cool to be 19 years old and get ready to
crazy.
start college. It's amazing to have so many people that are listening to this right now have literally heard you grow up.
Yeah, that's so crazy.
With this.
That's bizarre.
It is. Welcome to Tatooine Sons, a pop culture podcast. We believe that pop culture is the mythology of this generation, that there is a story, it is written on our souls, and that these myths speak to this story. And that is why we're looking closely at the overarching story of season 1 of The Acolyte, along with our thoughts on the themes and the major characters. What do you think, real quick before we get into the details? I'll start with you, Sam. Overall, taking production stuff, writing stuff, presentation stuff out of it, what's your initial reaction to the story of The Acolyte?
I'm trying to remember. It's been a minute since we watched the whole thing. It was
He's
okay.
thinking. He's thinking.
It was okay. It just maybe I don't know if it was a presentation. I'm not even really entirely sure what the story was.
This is a problem, and this is hopefully what we'll reconcile a little bit today.
I think that might be part of the problem.
All right, Nate, what are your thoughts on the story of the Acolyte?
I'm a big story guy, and I don't know. It was I mean, kind of like we went through 8 episodes.
Did we?
Why
go
did we need to go through 8 episodes? Kind of situation.
Okay.
Like, why did we need this show? It was the same issue I kind of had with Bad Batch.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to hopefully at least understand the story a little bit more, talk a little bit about the themes and some of the characters in it. And some of the things we're going to have a lot to talk about, and some we're not going to have much to talk about. And that's part of the problem, I think, with this show. But what we would like you to do is be a part of our community. And we build our community most consistently on Substack. We are trying to find a place that's got a little less drama than Facebook and Twitter or X or whatever that thing is, where people actually have conversations about things that they like, or if they don't like it, they can have conversations without turning it really weird and evil and ugly. And that's what we have found Substack as being that place. And so we want you to follow us on Substack. You can subscribe to our newsletter that comes out on Fridays. You can engage with us in our Substack chat community. All of that is free. We don't charge a penny for anything that we do on Substack, and we want you to be a part of that. So hop on over there and follow us there, and we'll be looking for you. Join us.
Yeah,
join us. All right. But enough talking about what we're going to talk about. Let's talk about what we're talking about. Okay, so let's do this in like bite-sized chunks. I want us to start with like what would be, okay, I'm just going to pull back the curtain for you guys as well as the listeners to understand how we did this. What I did was I took the entire plot summary I found online, and these were detailed. This would have been 30 or 40 pages worth of content, okay, for this episode. And I put it into ChatGPT and asked it to summarize things so that we can get
summarize the summary.
Well, as if it was one cohesive story front to back. And what would be the log line? What would be a plot synopsis for this? And then what would be like the most important things based on the entire story that happened in each episode. And it's really interesting to read these like episode summaries where ChatGPT is analyzing the entire series and saying, well, these are the important things that happened in this episode as a result. I think that's where it's going to be curious on this. But let's start with just the log line of this. In the shadow of the High Republic, 2 estranged twins navigate their intertwined destinies, with one embracing the dark side, the other caught between the light and darkness as they uncover secrets that could shatter the galaxy's perception of the Jedi Order. Okay, here's what I want to ask. Going into this series, that was not what the log line would have been for this series.
No, I don't even quite remember what it was.
But that's a very accurate description of
that fits.
This series.
Yeah, it satisfied all those points pretty much. Yeah.
Would you have coming into this series, if that had been the log line, because that's really what the story is about, how would that have shaped and crafted the way that you viewed the series coming in? I'll start with you, Sam.
I mean, I don't really remember what it was going into the movie, so I can't exactly say. Okay. I mean, it's still an interesting, just taking, if before the series came out, if I had read this, I, still probably would have watched the show, it's Star Wars. But I mean, it's certainly an interesting concept.
Well, looking at this log line though, if you going into this series, we had no idea. I mean, that we didn't know it was twins. We didn't understand like the galaxy's perception of the Jedi Order. We didn't kind of, some of these things we weren't prepared for at all.
Yeah.
Coming into this series, do you think being prepared for these things? Maybe you can look at address this, Nate. Do you think being prepared for some of these things a little bit more coming into the series would have helped you with the way that you received each episode going forward?
I don't even know if I can say kind of. Because there was a lot of mystery and intrigue going into this series, and then pretty much most of it was laid out within that first couple episodes. So, yes, I mean, if this was kind of the buildup they were trying to do throughout the entire series, then maybe, but I feel like we pretty much got this log line within the first couple episodes.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
that's fair.
it didn't shape it any different because we pretty much knew it from day one of watching it. We just didn't know it before. So I don't think it changed too much.
Okay. Well, let's look at it from a little broader plot summary. This is the way that the ChatGPT sort of summarized all 8 episodes into one plot summary with it. The first season of Star Wars The Acolyte unfolds against the backdrop of political intrigue and hidden agencies. Or no, excuse me, I can't read. Like I said in the previous episode, I have bad eyes. Okay, let me start over. The first season of Star Wars The Acolyte unfolds against the backdrop of political intrigue and hidden agendas, focusing on the tumultuous journey of twin sisters Osha and Mae Aniseya. The story begins with the murder of Jedi Master Indara by a masked assassin who was later revealed to be Mae. This sets off a series of events that drag Osha, a former Jedi Padawan turned corpsec mechanic, back into the conflict. What are your reactions to that more as a plot summary?
Pretty fair. I mean, that's a plot summary of the first episode, I'd say, more than anything. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Your reaction, anything, does that color anything differently for you, Sam?
No, I mean, like Nate said, that is just kind of the the intro to the series, that first episode.
Okay, now here's where it gets really interesting, because when you start asking ChatGPT to take the really in-depth plot description of each episode, like 4 or 5 paragraphs for each episode, then whittle it down into 1 paragraph for each episode, with focusing on the events that happen in those episodes that impact the larger story all the way through. It's interesting how it comes together. So we've got the first episode, 1, which is one of those dualistic titles, right? Lost Found. With this, the description is given: the season opens with Jedi Master Indara's death at the hands of Mae, who escapes. Osha, initially suspected of the murder, is apprehended by Jedi Knight Yord Fandar and crash lands on Karlak after an escape attempt by other prisoners. Jedi Master Sol, Osha's former master, along with Yord and the Padawan Jeki Lone, finds Osha, who reveals that Mae, her twin sister, is the true culprit. The Jedi decide to keep Indara's murder secret to avoid political fallout. Pretty accurate. Anything you would add?
Yeah,
to
no,
it
there was nothing really else that you could add to this description. I feel like it's pretty much what you can gather from the original.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of from what I can recall. That seems to kind of cover.
What was your reaction after the first? Oh, actually, let's wait till because the first 2 episodes released together.
Right.
So let's go to the next episode, and then we'll ask about like reaction from this at this point of it. So episode 2, Revenge Justice. Again, one of those dualistic titles with it. It says Mae's vendetta against the Jedi continues as she targets Master Torben with the help of a smuggler named Chimere, who provides her with a lethal poison. Despite Sol's assurance that Osha is an ally, Yord remains distrustful. Mae successfully poisons Torben and evades capture, with the Jedi learning about her Sith master. The episode delves into Osha and Mae's strained relationship, hinting at a tragic past involving their family. Feel accurate? Anything you would add to it? Color with it?
I can't think of anything that kind of hits all the bases. I mean, I really, it's just the only thing I would say is maybe that you see Yord's dedication to rules, I guess.
Okay, you get a little bit more fleshing out of the character there, and Jackie as well.
A little bit of that, but that's such a small thing. I'd say overall, it kind of hits all the points there.
Yeah, it pretty much does just hit all the points. Again, the thing with this series is it's not hard to summarize the plot, because it feels like it didn't want to jump too much. It didn't want to. You had a goal. The series successfully succeeded in telling a story of that goal, but it doesn't feel like we get much outside of it.
Okay.
So you can pretty much summarize every episode within a few sentences, and then you'll be like, yeah, that's it. That's pretty much it. And you can do a broad view of it and feel like, okay, yeah, I got the series at that point.
So my question then is, this was the first release segment, right? They released these episodes on opening night.
Right.
We came into this very excited about new Star Wars, very excited about the timing of this, when this series is taking place, the idea of a prequel to the prequels, lots of hope coming into this. Looking back, do you recall kind of what your thoughts were after the first 2 episodes of this? I'll start with you, Nathan.
I needed more. I remember that was how I thought. I was like, okay.
In a good way or a bad way?
In a
like, oh my gosh, it was awesome, I need more? Or was it like, oh, okay, I'm hoping I get more of to try to understand what's happening better?
It wasn't a bad way. It was just unsure. It was like, I think I'm enjoying what I'm watching, but I don't know if I really like it yet. Because there wasn't much to it. To these first 2 episodes, it felt like it really could have been reduced down to 1 episode, which is an issue we've brought up about this series before. So,
all right, Sam, what was your initial reaction after the opening first 2 episodes premiered?
I think mine was very similar to Nathan's. I mean, it was a very kind of, I guess, neutral standing. I didn't dislike it. I couldn't say it was like great either. I just needed to see more to see where it was going to be able to form an opinion. You know, like Nate said, not a lot happened really. I mean, we saw a couple Jedi get killed by Mae, and Osha's, now looking for her. And, there's some hints to some tragedy here and there, especially with Soul and things like that. But I mean, that's
like, you're trying to figure out why Mae wants to kill Indara, why Mae wants to kill Torben, Kelnaka, and of course Soul.
Mm-hmm. So, there's a little bit of intrigue there, but there was nothing in those episodes that was like, oh, okay, yeah, I need that next episode like right now. There was no big intrigue like that for me.
3rd episode is where things started to kind of, I think for a lot of people, us especially, we're like, okay, what are we doing here? What was this? This was Destiny. Now, again, not a dualistic title. We're going to get the other half of that dualistic title as a later episode with it, which we talked about on the previous episode. It might have been better for them to do those 2 together. But anyway, it says episode 3, Destiny, a flashback episode, reveals the twins' upbringing within a coven of Force-sensitive witches on Brendock. During a Jedi raid led by Soul, Torben, Kelnaka, and Indara, Mae accidentally starts a fire that devastates their home. Osha, determined to become a Jedi, is rescued by Soul, while Mae seemingly perishes. The episode highlights the bond between the twins and the tragic events that set them on divergent paths. Now, let me say this. I've shared my thoughts on this episode in depth because I was a guest on the Star Wars Underworld in the reaction episode they did to this episode of the Acolyte, and we reposted it as an episode on our show. So if you guys want to know my thoughts in detail on this episode, I liked a lot within this episode. I thought there were some good things within this episode, but my reaction overall was, okay, that production wise for me, this one I struggled with in a major way with it. But story wise, start with you, Sam. What were your thoughts on this episode, and what did you kind of how did you feel coming out of it from what you recall?
Yeah, I don't know if maybe the production side of things ended up sullying my perception of the rest of the episode. Because it's hard to kind of get through some of those things to be able to form a unbiased opinion on the rest of it. I know that there were certain aspects that felt weird about the episode. I was very apprehensive to the idea of them being like the twins being like what's the word?
Created by
like being like an Anakin thing. Yeah. That I was not a fan of to begin with. And I think it was revealed later on that wasn't the case.
Or it was there was a nuance with it.
Some cloning thing. So it wasn't quite right. So I know that kind of was weird. Other than that, I don't know how much happened with it. We saw that there was more character development between Osha and Mae. We saw more of their dynamic. We learned a little bit about where they came from, which points to tragedy, and we end up seeing that a little bit, or one side of it. There's that whole, was it Vergence? They bring that
brought up.
point in there, and that was kind of critical for later points in the series. But other than that, there wasn't a whole lot discussed, I guess.
What about you, Nathan?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the longest episodes of the season, and it feels like we pretty much get nothing from it. It was.
No, I don't. I disagree with that. There's a lot that happens. In this.
There was
we find
a lot
out
that
about
happens
the
in
twins
this.
being born. We talk, or they're, where they come from. We find out about the witches. We find out about some type of a tragedy that causes things to go on. I mean, there were things that.
But
happened
did it
in
need
this.
to be this long for them to
Probably
tell a
not.
story? And did what came up with Choice need to be as long as it did, tying into it?
Choice being the counterpoint episode to this one.
Yeah, that answers some of the questions. Great. I love that they answered some of the questions in Choice. But we go into this episode already hesitant. And then they give us an episode that feels like we are going backwards.
Well, we did go backwards.
We literally went
Yeah.
backwards. But I don't feel like we moved forwards any with the plot coming from this episode. And again, that's why I was a firm believer that this entire season should have been dropped at the same time. It would have made it a lot easier to enjoy.
Well, we can talk about that next week when we talk about like the production and the delivery of this a little bit.
And I think that overall this episode just it was kind of like a okay. It felt like Mae and Osha's episode. It definitely was. But to this point, I don't know if many of the people watching it really cared about Mae and Osha and their story at this point. We just wanted to know why we were watching this series in the first place. And then it kind of felt like it was Mae and Osha that we were watching it for, but then it turned out it really kind of wasn't, but was. It just raised a lot of questions without answering.
Okay. Next episode 4, Day. Osha, struggling with her past, joins Sol Yord, Jeki, and other Jedi on a mission to protect Kelnaka from Mae in the jungle of Kofar. Osha's connection to the Force is tested as they are attacked by creatures. Meanwhile, Mae plots to surrender to Kelnaka, but finds him already dead, killed by a helmeted Sith Lord who ambushes the Jedi. Reactions to this episode, Nate?
It didn't do much.
But the ending, I think we all reacted
ending
really
was great.
positively to.
5 minutes.
The last 2 minutes, it was really good. And it was for the first time in this series where I got really excited to watch the next week. But you talk about the rest of the episode, and it does not feel like there was much to it at all. And I understand it was one of the shorter episodes of the season. That makes sense. It checks out. But it goes back to how probably Day and Night should have been one episode together. I don't care if it comes out to be an hour long. We're big boys. We can handle it. You got to have something a little more to it.
And this goes back to what I think I said on the last episode. At times, this show went fast when it should have been slow, and it went slow when it should have been fast.
And then
this episode really does this. The first 20 minutes of this episode feel like it's going really, really, really slow, and then the ending is like way too fast.
And then you bring in Mae's character, and this goes to the story. I mean, writing is the story when it comes to TV, and it feels like the writing of Mae's character in this specific episode felt really off.
Weird.
The entire episode she's talking about how she needs to be a Sith, needs to please her master with Kamir, and you're just detailing all of that. And then
Never mind.
5 seconds after she's discussing how she's going to kill Kelnaka, she's like, wait, I need to turn myself in. I've had a change of heart. And there was no hints that she might be considering otherwise. She was devoted to it the entire 3.5 episodes to this point, and then she just switches, and that comes down to the story, that comes down to the writing. It felt off, it felt like whiplash, and it didn't genuinely make too much sense overall, but that was the struggle with the episode. And then you bring in Darth Smiley at the end, and it's all kind of better because he was really cool. He was an awesome part of this episode. So.
Sam, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, it was largely the same mindset. I mean, it just kept dragging and nothing was happening, and then all of a sudden it just all happened at one time, and it's tough to watch because you kind of mentally check out there in the beginning, and then all of a sudden you gotta be like, oh, well, okay, well, now I gotta figure out what's happening, and because I was kind of bored and you don't know what's happening, so it's tricky with those episodes and with things like that.
Okay. Next episode, episode 5, Night. The Sith Lord revealed to be Chimere massacres the Jedi, killing Jeki and Yord. Mae, trying to protect Osha, ends up in a confrontation with Sol. The episode exposes Chimere's true identity and his dark intentions. Osha's conflict intensifies as Mae assumes her identity to deceive Sol. Sam, what are your thoughts on Night?
Best episode of the series. Easily.
Why is that the best episode?
Cool fights.
I mean, yeah.
That's a part of it. Absolutely.
I mean, that's part of Star Wars. Let's just be honest. Excuse me. Yes, the fights were awesome. Some of the best fights we've gotten in Star Wars. I'll say that over and over again. But we also got some real intrigue finally. Mm-hmm. You know, in episode 4, Chimere, his character felt really weird, like overly, like almost like Jar Jar Binks, but just stupid, like overly stupid, I guess is the way to put it. You know,
well,
like,
he's putting on a front,
right? And it was weird in a vacuum in that episode. It was so odd.
So I think we really liked Chimere in episode 2.
He was fine. He was fine. Yeah.
To it, I think that in episode 4, we're kind of like,
why is he
acting the way that he's acting?
It was so
like, this
over
is really bad. Like,
yeah,
I thought this is just really bad writing.
Yeah, and then we get this episode and we're like, it makes sense now. He was putting on a front. He's actually a very interesting villain. One of the coolest villains we've gotten in Star Wars. There's some intrigue. He's saying some stuff to Osha and Mae that is like hinting to some dark secret that we don't know about.
We get the cortosis stuff,
yes,
and how that's interacting in the battle, and
so there were a lot of really good moments, and the important thing is some intrigue. And I think, you know, the issue we had with Chimere in episode 4 would have been remedied had this been one episode, because it would have been a very quick, he's acting stupid for a few minutes. That's weird. That's why he was doing it, as opposed to waiting a week.
It should be slow. Right. It goes too slow when it should be fast. Yep. Okay, Nate.
Yeah, it was a great episode. Loved the fight scenes, and I thought that it ended for the first time where I was like, okay, I can actually have, like, I want to theorize about what's coming up next week. Like, for the first time, you know, Mae and Osha switching places was cool. It was interesting. It's a good change of pace for this show. And it was well done. And then it feels like they tipped their hand too much in the next episode, because I remember... let's talk about it.
Let's talk about that episode. Episode 6, Teach Corrupt. So it's a dualistic title again. Osha wakes up on an unknown planet with Chimere, who begins to manipulate her. Sol, attempting to warn the Jedi Council, faces technical malfunctions and betrayal. Vernestra Rowe, a Jedi Master, initiates a rescue mission to Kofar, suspecting Sol's involvement in the massacre. The episode delves into Osha's internal struggle as she begins to question her past and the Jedi's role in it. So Nate, you know, as we moved into this episode, things shifted again for you. What?
Yeah, it was like, okay, Osha's now having to deal with this, you know, being past the Jedi. Mae's having to deal with being a Sith and now dealing with the Jedi and all that stuff. It was really great. And, you know, I feel like their big reveal, their big moment at the end of this series was that Osha became a Sith and Mae kind of became that good guy eventually, and I feel like that was supposed to be the big reveal at the end of the series, and they tipped their hand way too much for that in this episode, because I remember watching this episode and predicting that like halfway through was going to be a big part, and I thought it was going to be brought up in this next episode, and then they were going to deal with it in the last one. And they make it the big part in the last one. And then you bring up just the general story contained in this episode. And again, it feels like we don't really go anywhere. Like you said, it goes too fast when it should go slow, and too slow when it should go fast. We bring into this past episode that really felt like we were going somewhere, and we should have kept that momentum. And it feels like we had a hard stop. This feels like a travel episode and a lot of dialogue, which I'm not against dialogue. I love exposition, but a lot
of this could have happened at the end of an episode or the beginning of a next, and then moved into the more story.
Yeah,
stuff.
This could have been a 15-minute like segment of an episode, and I feel like that ties into a lot. It feels like like, we've had this discussion before when a pastor takes a 2-minute illustration of a sermon and makes it into a 30 to 45-minute sermon. You feel it, you're watching it, you're like, I agree, I like this is good, but man, I am bored. And so that feels like where this episode really started to struggle.
Say what you need to say, and then let's move on. Sam, what did you think about episode 6?
Yeah, I don't remember this episode a ton for whatever reason. I don't know. Maybe it's because of Nathan's point. I thought the whole, it was that very typical thing we've seen in Star Wars, the Sith master trying to corrupt the good guy, that whole thing. But we actually see seeds of it like working in this, much like with Anakin. And so it was cool. And we got more, intrigue with the whole cortosis thing being like a sensory deprivation tank, but for the Force and stuff. It was some interesting stuff, but like Nate mentioned, it probably could have been shortened up a little bit for this episode.
Okay. Then we go back in time again. Episode 7, Choice. Another flashback to Brendock reveals the true events of the night the witches were attacked. The Jedi, searching for a Force virgins, discover the twins and confront Mother Aniseya, leading to a tragic misunderstanding and the witches' deaths. Soul is forced to choose between saving Osha or Mae, ultimately choosing Osha, and this revelation sets the stage for the final confrontation. Sam, thoughts on Choice when we go back to the flashback there?
Yeah, that was, again, it was in some interesting stuff. I just am still not sure how I feel about like the whole witches thing, like that whole subplot or that whole setting and stuff. It's weird. Night Sisters were weird too, so I can't exactly like say this all in good conscience, but this just felt weirdly weird for Star Wars, and I don't know if that's just me. Some of the Jedi motives and way they handled things felt out of character even for corrupt Jedi. Like, we know that the Jedi's messed up and we've seen some of that, but they would always do things in a sort of for the ultimate better good. And this one just felt...
It was for selfishness.
It was very selfish. It didn't fit. It just felt weird.
Especially for a time that it's supposed to be the height of the Jedi. Like, this whole episode just... Again, I feel like I'm saying the same thing over again. But we pretty much got a lot of this in Destiny. We understood a lot of this. And the big revelation from this episode is that Soul had a misunderstanding and killed the mother, which it feels like if they were just, mature adults and had sat down and had a conversation, this entire series would be resolved. But that doesn't happen. Understandably so. It's Star Wars, you got to have that happen. But
it's what Padme says in Revenge of the Sith. You know that this is a failure to listen, or I guess that's in episode 2.
It is.
I thought that was what Anakin said. He's like, people should be sit down in a room and have a discussion. He's like, that's what we do. They just don't always agree.
So.
And we get this episode, and it's just it feels like Master Torben. He's young, hothead, but it also seems like he just really misses his home, which feels like such a strange motivation.
Yeah, a weak motivation.
It feels like they specifically wanted the plot to move a certain way, but weren't really sure how to have the plot move that way. And so they just bring in this, he misses his home and wants to go home, and he feels bad that he's on a mission, which I don't feel like you should be a Jedi if you aren't okay being on missions for extended periods of time. It feels like the motivations of a lot of these characters were a bit iffy. And then in Dara, there was a lot of consideration of like, ooh, is there something else going on with her? But in this episode, it just feels like she's just a normal Jedi at this point. So there is an intrigue there. So it doesn't seem to
match up with what we've seen of her in those other episodes.
And then you bring in Soul. Like, that was the last ditch theory that Soul was this big villain. And no, pretty much in this episode, it confirms he's just a chill dude that had a misunderstanding with a person that was seemingly merging or sucking the soul out of this person he was wanting to be a Padawan. Soul in the right here. At least I believe so. He was defending somebody else from a completely unknown aspect. Anybody sees what's going on with that weird misty soul ghost thing,
whatever.
Your first reaction is probably going to be defense, or at least finishing this. And then that big reveal is that that's the main issue. Is that Mae saw him kill his, which I understand she's a kid, but it feels like after some time you should probably consider that was a really weird situation. So it just feels off.
Final episode, The Acolyte, actually the namesake of the series as well. Osha, now connected to the Force through Chimeras Hamlet, agrees to confront Mae and Sol on Brendok. Mae breaks free and heads to Brendok, pursued by Sol. The climactic battle reveals deep secrets and leads to Sol's death at Osha's hands, turning his kyber crystal red, bleeding it, which was a fun, cool moment. Venestra arrives with reinforcements, framing Sol for the massacre. Osha, now fully embracing the dark side, becomes Chimeras Acolyte, setting up future conflicts. Nate, how did you feel about the finale of season 1?
It wrapped up their story, which I feel like was already weak to begin with, but it finished it to an extent. You have Plagueis show up for like 5 seconds, and you're a little bit concerned about that. You have Osha and Kamir now on whatever that planet was, apparently going to be training. You have Mae being forgotten by Osha, or having her memory wiped of everything, and now being part of the Jedi Order, so she'll probably be trained. And then you have Yoda being brought up, and you have a lot of...
And you have Plagueis peek around the corner.
Yeah. You have a lot of things being set up for a second season that you don't know is going to happen when you were already, personally, like unsatisfied with the answers we already got from the weak questions that we already have asked.
Okay.
You have Mae and Osha being switched places, and you feel like you're pretty much back at the start. They just switched. And so you're like, okay, that could be an interesting second season, but we don't know if that's happening. At least make this first season intriguing enough to carry it. You have some great fight scenes between Sol and Chimera. Great stuff. That is a highlight of this series. There is no doubt there. And again, you kind of feel really bad about how Venestra makes Sol the scapegoat for the Jedi's faults. You know, you bring that up, and it's the corruption of the Jedi. And while I'm okay seeing the Jedi being corrupt and then taking different paths after episode 3, I think when we're supposed to be at the height of the Jedi, I don't really want to see that happening in this situation. I want to see the Jedi be good, because it's honestly pretty rare we haven't seen that yet. That's what we were excited for.
Right.
And I'd like to see it in live action. I know I can read the books of the High Republic and get that, but I mean, when we're getting a High Republic show, I kind of want to see that too. So,
Sam, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, part of when you said it, we didn't get anything in this show that made it High Republic. I mean, let's just be really honest here. It was just another Star Wars show.
This could have been set in the prequels.
Yeah, I mean, there was nothing about it
could have been a Clone Wars
set it apart to be High Republic. And that was kind of disappointing, because it's such an interesting time period and setting, and we didn't explore it any. But yeah, I mean, this episode, it did what it had to do, I guess. The fights were cool. They were good. The little cameos with Plagueis and Yoda felt cheap.
I think the word you're looking for is forced.
No, it just felt cheap. Like they were throwing it in there to get a little bit of a reaction. And after that whole series, you're just still like, all right, cool. Like, but nothing happened, you know? Why should I get excited about that? If those had been maybe more central somehow, or more intrigue instead of just Plagueis reaching around a corner. I mean, we're still kind of speculating that it's Plagueis. Nobody said it is.
Okay. It has been confirmed.
Okay. But it's just, yeah, I'm with Nate. I don't want more corrupted Jedi yet. I want to see some good for once. We brought this issue up in the last episode of that when we were talking about the Acolyte. Nobody was good or bad in that whole series. I mean, the two main characters switch places. Sol's revealed to be kind of iffy. Kamir's kind of got some good points. Venestra frames her friend for things so she doesn't have to deal with problems. You know, like there's all these weird...
And then she gets called to the principal's office.
Yeah. Right. So there's all these weird moments. You're like, okay, who do I care for? Like, who's on the right side here? No one.
And then the characters that seem to have the most, I mean, other than Master Soul, I know people loved Mae, they loved Osha as characters, people loved Soul, people loved Chimere. I get all of that. But like the two characters that seemed to get the most emotional reaction from people were Yord and Jeki, and they get killed off.
Right.
I didn't like
4,
Yord.
and they had no bearing on this show whatsoever.
No,
it felt like they were going somewhere for character development with Yord in that second episode, like we mentioned, and then he's killed off in pretty much in the next episode.
It felt like it was just a shock value type thing.
Right.
And
Yeah,
same with
that's exactly
Jeki.
what it was.
Jeki was fun. Jeki was interesting enough, and felt like had a connection to Osha, and then we just get nothing with it. And so it didn't even give motivation for Osha.
Well, we had a lot more that we were going to talk about on this episode with characters and with themes in this. I think we're going to save that for a conversation in a later episode. We're going to move next week into literally talking about the production. And here's a question I hope that maybe you listening can consider over the next week. I want these two guys to consider this. Would this series not only have been better to be dropped all at once in the binge format, but would have been better as Star Wars animation?
Anything else?
All right. Well, thanks for listening. Our weekly release schedule is pretty simple. On Mondays, we talk about whatever we're excited about. I think next week we're going to end up talking about the new M. Night Shyamalan movie Trap, which is getting some really
Negative.
contrasting opinions. Either people love it or they absolutely hate it. Nathan, you and I saw it last night.
Do you want to give your quick Letterboxd review?
I loved it.
Rating?
It was 4 and a like.
I'm 4 and a like too.
All right.
So
Sam, you're going to be seeing it this afternoon.
I will. Yep.
And so you'll be able to give that next week. We're going to talk about that movie. I think we're going to have a lot to talk about with that. Wednesday's New Comic Book Day. We talk about what we're reading, what new comic books came out, and how that relates to all the other things that we talk about. Next Friday, we're going to talk about the Acolyte. We're going to talk about the production. We're going to talk about the packaging. Like, how was this thing delivered, and could they have done some things differently in order for it to be received differently? Follow us on Substack, weekly recaps, in-depth exploration, community engagement, trying to get to 100 before we have something special that we're going to release to you guys we've talked about before. I think that's going to pretty much do it for this week's shows. Anything else you guys want to say?
may the Force be with you.
May the Force be with you.
May the Force be with you, always.
This party's over.
I like that Wookiee.
Don't get technical with me.
Joy, please.
Yep, yep.